How soon hath time, the subtle thief of youth, stolen on his wing my 23 year! My hasting days fly on with full career, but my late spring no bud or blossom showeth. Perhaps my semblance might deceive the truth, that I to manhood am arrived so near, and inward ripeness doth much less appear, that some more timely happy spirits indueth. Yet be it less or more, or soon or slow, it shall be still in strictest measured even to that same lot, however mean or high, toward which time leads me, and the will of heaven. All is, if I have grace to use it so, as ever in my great taskmaster's eye. That's sonnet number 7 by John Milton, and it's from this book here. And the reason I got this one is because it maintains his original spelling, and I think that makes a book much better if it's written in the same way that it was written. This is going to be just showing a lot of books I got for my income tax return money, which is just another excuse for me to buy books. But I did get some good ones. That John Milton being one of them. And then today I went to the bookstore after work, and I found this one that I've been looking for a while, by Wyndham Lewis, Tar, the 1918 version, because there is another version that's out. I think the Oxford World Classics puts it out, but it's not the original edition. I think he edited it later, and then I don't care about that one. But I've been trying to get this one for a while, and it's always been pretty expensive. But the bookstore near me had a good sale, so I was able to get it. It's kind of nice to see how things were at the time, because I believe this was written in like 1916 or 1917, and captures the time period better than I think some other things could. The main book I've been reading, which I have had for a while, is Dr. Faustus by Thomas Mann. And I've really been loving it. I should have read it sooner, but I didn't. But I've been really enjoying it so far. It's given me many interesting ideas. One that struck me particularly was, I think, like in one of the early chapters, like maybe chapter 7, at the very end, he's talking about love, and he says something like, the only thing more powerful than love is interest in like affecting human actions. And I think he's right. What else? All right. One is another one I got today. Is Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar. And I don't really know much about this one, honestly, but it's so well regarded as Latin American literature that I decided to make it easier for me to read. And then my third and final book I got today is the Norton Critical Edition of Moby Dick. And the reason I got this is because I'm reading Blood Meridian for a Southwest literature class now, and it's even more obvious to me now how the similarities between Blood Meridian and Moby Dick. And also I've been I follow this Moby Dick quote thing on Twitter, and I've really been enjoying the quotes that they post on there. Let's see. Yeah, screw it. I'll find it. One of the best ones is in chapter 13, called I don't know what is chapter 13 anyway. The wheelbarrow, I think. And I'll read it here. I should be able to find it pretty quick. All right, so yeah, it's paragraph 5, I think. At last, passage paid and luggage safe, we stood on board the schooner. Hoisting sail, it glided down the Acushnet River. On one side, New Bedford rose in terraces of streets, their ice-covered trees all glittering in the clear, cold air. Huge hills and mountains of casks on casks were piled upon her wharves. And side by side the world-wandering whale-ships lay silent and safely moored at last, while from others came a sound of carpenters and coopers, with blended noises of fires and forges to melt the pitch, all betokening that new cruises were on the start. That one most perilous and long voyage ended, only begins a second, and a second ended only begins a third, and so on forever and for aye. Such is the endlessness, yea, the intolerableness of all earthly effort. I just think it's so fascinating that he wrote that. So, I think I normally hold my phone differently. Yeah, I normally hold it. I don't want to mess it up, but I normally hold it the other way. That's why I look like this. All right, and then some other books I ordered. I went on spring break to Tennessee, and I ordered some books to meet me on my way back. And one of those books was the John Milton, and then another one of those books was the poems of Alexander Pope. This is published by the Yale University Press. And I'm pretty sure it's all of his poems, except for the 1712 version of The Rape of the Lock, I guess. But it basically has everything. And as you can tell from getting John Milton's complete poems and Alexander Pope, I've really been, since I'm taking a Shakespeare class, I'm really trying to get more acquainted with the classics. Not for any particular reason, but just because it's interesting. Because my Shakespeare teacher also is really knowledgeable in Milton. He actually helped edit the anthology, the really big one that has his complete poetry and prose, the black one. I can't remember who publishes it. I think it's Modern Library. But yeah, he's one of the editors on it. And he really does know a lot about Milton. I think it's interesting. So I kind of want to learn about these other guys. And I also, just from you can tell from that poem that I read in the beginning of Milton's that he's just very good. And that's really the only reason you need to read him. And also the editor is named John Butt for this Alexander Pope. What else? Oh, I can't remember if I showed this one before. I probably didn't. But this is an interesting one. The Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. Hopefully I'm saying that right. This is a work from, I think a little bit after the Islamic Golden Age, 1300s. He died in 1406, roughly the same time as Geoffrey Chaucer. But this is a work on the philosophy of history. And I mainly got this because I think it would be something that I could never find anywhere else. So that's why I got it. I've read a little bit of the beginning, and it's interesting so far. And then when I came back from my trip, I went to my favorite bookstore up in Denton, and I got some books there. Um, One of them is The Last Puritan by George Santayana. Been trying to convince myself to get this one for a while, and I finally gave in. And then another one I got since I'm reading Dr. Faustus, I got more interested in Thomas Mann's later works. And I saw that he wrote something called Confessions of Felix Krull, Confidence Man. And The Confidence Man by Herman Melville is one of my favorite books. So I thought it would be perfect for me to read this. And also, I think it's an interesting connection that the Recognitions began as a Faust story. Dr. Faustus was published in 1947, which is also coincides with the years that William Gaddis was working on the Recognitions, and 1955 is, of course, the year that the Recognitions was published, and that's the year that Thomas Mann died, and also the year that the Confessions of Felix Krull, Confidence Man was published in English. This is a first edition copy here. And it's very cheap. I'm surprised. It's actually the cost for this was the cost of a new paperback. So I figured, screw it. Might as well have the one that was published the same year as the Recognitions. And then another one I was planning on getting even before I went to the bookstore and was just lucky to find it is The Peach Blossom Fan by Kung Sheng Jen. Not sure if I said that right, but this is a play from let's see if I get this right, from the transition from the Ming Dynasty to the Qing Dynasty. And I get the impression that I think it's been said that this guy's like a sort of a Shakespeare figure, where he's widely regarded as one of the greatest playwrights in China. But the main reason I wanted to get it is because it says on the back here, I read this somewhere else, but this summarizes it well. The Peach Blossom Fan is a poetic drama about national cataclysm. More than 300 years ago, the Ming Dynasty, the last native Chinese imperial house, fell before rebel onslaughts, made a short-lived attempt at restoration in the south, then yielded finally to the invading Manchus. Written in the 1690s, Kung Shengzhen was able to gather the recollections of survivors. Out of these and a multitude of documentary accounts, he constructed a great historical play in the elegant southern Chinese style. So, yeah, I love the idea. I've always liked apocalypses. One of the first stories I tried to write, like seriously write and make an extended attempt at, was a sort of apocalypse story that was based on like Earth Abides, The Road, Alas Babylon, those sort of books. And so I've always liked thinking about how humans or how people react in cataclysms or very difficult situations. And so I think it'd be very interesting to see how someone in the 1690s in China would write about that. And also, because I'm taking a Shakespeare class where we're talking to Chinese students, it would probably be beneficial for me to read who would be considered a Shakespeare figure for them. I've also been looking a little bit at the Dream of the Red Chambers, the translation that's called The Story of the Stone, which is, I think, considered the best novel in Chinese literature. It was published in the 1790s, but it was written in the 1760s, so roughly the same time as Lawrence Stern was writing. And then this is one of the books that I had ordered that was waiting for me when I came back from my trip. Jerusalem Delivered by Torquato Tasso. And there's several reasons why I wanted to get this. One reason is because Goethe wrote a play about him. Another reason because he wrote this play when he was fairly young, and then later he got somewhat paranoid and revised it into another epic poem that people don't think is as good. And so I would be more interested in the original. I was also interested in the idea that it's writing about the First Crusade, which is where the West invaded the Middle East. And I think that'd be interesting to see, because I was deciding either between this or the Lusiads by Camões. I was also trying to decide if I should get the Lusiads or his lyric poems, but I was able to find his lyric poems online, and I read a lot of them, and a lot of them were love poems, and they were really simplistic love poems. I'm sure they're better in Portuguese, but in English translation, even though I gathered the guy was fairly good at translating, they were very simplistic, like basically pop lyrics, and I didn't like them. But the poems that he wrote that didn't have to do with like loving some random girl were very good. There was one he wrote about standing on a beach somewhere, and it must have been somewhere in India. I think it may have even said it specifically where it was, but it was like somewhere in India, far, far away from Portugal. And he gives like a reminiscence of that. And it makes me think of two things. Basho's poem, In Kyoto, Hearing the Cuckoo, I Long for Kyoto, something like that, the haiku. And then it also makes me think of Pessoa, Lisbon Revisited, or O Soar a Lima, where he thinks back to the past and is nostalgic. I really like those sort of poems. Let's see here. Yeah, so that's the main reasons why. Also, he lived a pretty interesting life, and yeah, he lived in an interesting time also, the late 1500s. And another reason, I don't really know Italian literature very well. I know Cesare Pavese. I don't really know Dante very well, unfortunately. I know Petrarch a little bit, but I really know the troubadour poets more than I know the Italians. A lot of the troubadours were like southern France, so unfortunately I don't really know Italian literature very well, which is unfortunate. Oh, I know Leopardi, but which is not really a trivial thing. But yeah, I like Leopardi and Pavese, but I don't know Dante very well. I don't read many of the novels like Manzoni or whoever else. Oh, I did read, what's that person's name? Shoot, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. Elena Ferrante. I read the first book of that, and it was pretty interesting, but what I liked it for, other books do way better. Like Dr. Faustus is significantly better than Elena Ferrante at the same things, like being nostalgic for a past time, talking about a friend who was like a genius type character. The only thing that I think, well, this, because it's completely different. Like this talks about Germany and the other one talks about Italy. So that's talking about Italy is what Elena Ferrante does very well, but which is its own benefit. But yeah, whatever. What else? Oh yeah, and the last book I got at the bookstore is one that I have been looking at for a while and trying to see if I actually wanted it. Julian Rios, Larva or A Midsummer Night's Babel. I've been trying to see if I want it because I'm weary of such a book being translated, but it was fairly inexpensive, and I just figured, screw it. Every time I go to that bookstore, I see it there, and I'm like, if anyone's going to buy it, it'll probably be me. So I might as well just get it over with. And so I just went ahead and bought it. And I guess I'll talk about this one random idea I had. So while I was also at the bookstore, I read part of Juan Goita Solo. He wrote some autobiographical volumes. The second one, which begins in 1956 and I think continues through the 80s, a part of it, I think it was in the beginning, it said something like the three most powerful reasons for doing anything are like basically interest, sexual desire, and things to do with like literature for him, that he was speaking personally, not as a universal. But I think if you extrapolate those things as a universal, you get two categories. That's interest and like kind of like romantic sexual desire, something which is kind of like a branch of interest, I would say. But like in that Dr. Faustus thing, the only thing more powerful than love is interest. And I was thinking in the context of this Larva, Midsummer Night's Babel, or Dr. Faustus, or Kierkegaard's writing on Don Juan. It's very interesting that, the main things are basically like very intelligent or witty, and then being not necessarily obsessed with like women in these cases, but being completely overwhelmed by interest in the like intellectual area and also in the like love physical area. And that's exemplified by Faustus and Don Juan. And I'm also reading Hamlet now for my Shakespeare class. And I want to kind of... I wonder if I can relate Hamlet to these things, because Hamlet's also like an archetypal character, but I haven't thought about the sections with Ophelia enough. I'm going to have to think of that. I didn't think of that yet. But yeah, so Midsummer Night's Babel Larva is kind of like a Don Juan frame story inspiration type thing. So that's part of the reason I got it. But also part of the reason is I'm taking a class on paratext now. And if you're not familiar with this book, as you can see, I don't know if I'll get this right, but the right page on the right has the text, and then the page on the left has like notes for the text, as if it's like a commentary explaining the book. And another book I got recently, a couple months ago, Michel Leiris' Phantom Africa. It also does something similar, but he actually wrote the notes because he felt things needed to be explained, and he wanted to keep the notes minimal. This is almost the opposite, because he put the notes in the actual book, and he put a lot of them. Half of the book is notes. So, yeah, I just think it's interesting. It's all very interesting. But, yeah, I think I'll end the video here. I'll try to make some more in-depth videos rather than just showing you books that I bought. But I don't do this for any weird reasons. I just do it because I think I spend quite a lot of time reading books and finding interesting books, and I think people can relate to that. Oh, another book I bought that I don't have near me is Tom Jones, I got the Modern Library Edition, one of those small editions that you can carry around pretty easily. And then also Pierre Scarron, the comic romance, which heavily influenced Henry Fielding and Lawrence Stern. So, yeah, I got those also. So, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you think these books are interesting, let me know. If you've read any of them, let me know. Yeah, thanks for watching. Death is a Game Boss.